make sure to always have fun with what you're creating. Like, first things first, like, I know that part's a job, but it takes a while to get to that point.
Hey y'all, my name is Imani and welcome to the Mad Habits Podcast, the place where indie creators share their behind the scenes process. Before we continue with this episode, I want to give a quick shout out to Dearest Haley on YouTube for showing me some love. Thanks for the feedback, I really appreciate it. I really hope you have a great listening experience as with all of you. So I read From Within. He sent me the first issue, it was 46 pages. The artwork was phenomenal, the writing was really engaging. The main character was a total badass, so I will actually make a different video about that review. If you want to see the review, you need to stay tuned for my indie comic showcase videos where I review indie comics. I usually do 3-in-1 videos, so stay tuned for that review. But today, I'm going to be interviewing the creator. Here to talk about his martial arts indie comic From Within, his writing process, and his experience interviewing with Comic Book Yeti, Alex Breen. Now, without further ado, let's get it.
It's Mad. Why did you decide to start making comics?
So, I just kind of fell in love with comics over my college years. Like my freshman year, I think I was reading them in college, in high school, but then like my freshman year, I just slowly started. It started replacing my love of film because that was my first love, I'd say. And there was a point where I read an omnibus. It was the Iron Fist omnibus by Ed Brubaker, Matt Fraction, and David Aja. Excellent comic if you haven't read it. I'd recommend everyone check that out. I read through that thing in one sitting. And by the time I finished it, I realized, man, I want to make comics. Like that was the impetus for me.
So what was your inspiration for your series, From Within?
So I'm sure on some level, a little bit of that Iron Fist inspiration was there, but that's not overtly like my main inspiration. At the time, I was dealing with I had a little bit of anger going on at the time from some personal stuff going on. So that was part of the thing that fed into it. There was a little bit of Mortal Kombat where like, I love the lore of Mortal Kombat. And I kind of wanted to deal with something, maybe not as long form, but, kind of, it's a big series. We'll get into that a little later, but that's one inspiration. Then another one was just Bruce Lee movies. I think I'm probably going to get, I think I said the movie, it's not Enter the Dragon. That's my main influence. There was this one, I think it was Fist of Fury, where it was kind of dealing with like Bruce Lee can go into a room and wreck a whole bunch of people. But that movie also showed that there were some consequences for him choosing to go in and, perform violence on people. So like I thought that was like pretty nuanced for a martial arts film where we just want to see like someone wreck a bunch of people, but like showing like, oh, there are some consequences to that is pretty cool.
Renzo Podesta. Found him on this website called digitalwebbing.com. I listened to your other podcast, Don't Try and Make It Happen, episode 1. What was your experience working with this artist and why did you choose him?
So Renzo is such a sweetheart. A lot of From Within was us kind of working, like clearly we had day jobs that we had to do on the side with this. Like, so, a lot of this story took a couple of years of getting the scripts to him and then him working on the art. And from that loop, we really refined how we work together. I think the beautiful thing about comics is collaboration. So you kind of get a sense of, okay, what are the things that Renzo does insanely well? Well, he definitely knocks action scenes out of the park. It's obviously trying to tailor stories around to his strengths. And, the more I worked with him, the more I got a sense of what his strengths were. But he was always fantastic to work with as well. I was never like on the phone with him during my collaborations, but we did talk extensively through email. So, I'm really grateful to have had a chance to work with him. And, as far as like, I guess what made him the right choice for the book, when I was looking at, when you do digital webbing, and I'm pretty sure it's still the case, I think it's still up and running now. It's basically like a job wanted ad for artists. So you're going to get artists from all kinds of skill levels that are sending you samples. And, some are outside of your price range or some are cheap, but, it's, the skill level might not be the best fit for the project. Like I said, it's a whole various number of skills. But, from that batch, Renzo seemed like, from the interactions talking about the story, he seemed super into it, which, having an artist be into your story is a huge plus. And then I really enjoyed his art style. So that was the initial decision behind picking him.
I feel like his art style really complements your serious writing tone. His sharp edges and like the intensity of the characters' faces, it was like bread and butter, man. What is fun to you about the comic creating process?
Just about everything, to be honest. Like I love breaking a story down. I love when you figure out where you're going with the story and then just breaking it down page by page. Like, this is the action I want to convey here. This is the point I want to convey here. And when you get in the groove of just like when I write anyway, like, and I can write at my office, which is right here, or I could write at a Starbucks for all I care. I hate Starbucks, for the record. It's more like a local coffee shop. But point is, I get a level of focus where the entire room zones out, and like there could be a tank that rolls through that place and I wouldn't notice, like, when I get like that focus. But that's like the zone that's like the perfect like that's a nice bit. And then also just the other great bit is after you're done with the script and when you're working with an artist, because I can't draw to save my life, but when I get that art in for the first time, it's like a Christmas present. Every single time I get some new art, it's like, oh, like how are they going to do this script? Like, what are they going to add to it? I love that stuff.
That's so how do you get yourself in that zone, man? Like, do you have to have music on, or like, do you have to watch like a movie or something to get inspiration? Like, what gives you motivation?
Interesting. I think a little bit of everything. Sometimes it's a movie. Sometimes there's like a movie gives you an idea. A video game gives you an idea. It's definitely part of being a creator is to make sure you're still, consuming media, because that gives you different reference points to draw from. Sometimes it's a thought. Like, I had a horror short that I made during the pandemic, and it just came from a place of just a thought I realized about my life. And I took that and ran it into the most extreme direction I could. But like, inspiration hits in all kinds of different ways.
It really does. So as a writer, this is one of my biggest problems. And I think any writer could, especially a young writer, has to go through this. What do you do when you feel stuck? Like, there's a scene or something you're trying to write, you feel stuck. How do you get out of that?
Well, it's deadlines are a great way to force yourself out of that, for sure. Like, when I wrote for Renzo, or when I first hired him, I didn't have anything scripted. And I was like, I hired him on a Thursday, and I said I'd have the first chapter for you on Monday. And that was 20 pages. And, he's counting on me to, deliver the goods, because, that's part of, he could have taken a job from someone else because, he's counting on that money to come in. Comics aren't cheap. He's got to be able to make his rent, just like I got to make my rent. So, that's part of it. But like, as I've grown more, I don't actually believe in being stuck anymore. It's figuring out a process that works best for you. For me, for instance, like, I know that, when I outline, I know, okay, what are the big beats I want to hit for this chunk of story? Whether it's 8 pages, 10 pages, whatever. Okay, I want to accomplish that. And then try and divide it down to, okay, what's the best way for me to get to that destination? I think probably one of the better ways I've heard it described, because like sometimes there are people who can like go super like ridiculously detailed with that, meticulous, like, but I think you should leave yourself a little room for discovery. I think like Matt Fraction said that, writing can be like a roadmap where you want to get to this destination. But, like if I want to get to California and I'm in Illinois, as long as I'm going west, I'm good. But hey, maybe it's okay for me to take a pit stop in St. Louis for a bit, or maybe it's good for me to take a pit stop in Arizona on the way there. Like, that's not the main plan, but like I can, do these little detours along the way. And I think giving yourself a little room for spur of the moment ideas, a little bit of room in your story to go like, well, actually, I think in this moment, the character would respond better for here. like, I think that makes it more fun for you, because if you're too detailed on an outline, then that might take away some of the joy of creating it.
How long do you plan on running your series From Within?
So what's going on right now with Dauntless is that this Greenlight campaign's going right now. It's collecting the first 2 chapters into one oversized issue. In reality, there are 10 chapters of this story. So, it's going to have a nice build to it. There's going to be some, especially in the next couple of chapters, things that are really going to get intense. Like, if you think it's intense right now, it gets even more crazy as it goes. So it's a long build, but it's worth the journey.
Is 10 issues like medium, long, short? What range is that?
Well, I would say for independent comics, that's pretty long, because usually it's tough to even get the 5 when you're independent and starting out. I kind of swung for the fences and was a little crazy. Sometimes when I tell people like how big that story is, I tend to get a couple of like raised eyebrows, like, what are you, crazy? But like usually standard American comic issues usually go for like 20 to 24 pages. Some of them go a little bit more, but that's usually the average of like what an artist can sustain within a monthly type of deadline, especially if you're dealing with like, bigger companies.
So speaking of companies, let's talk about Dauntless Publisher. They promote bold and serious comics, but like their following on Twitter isn't like huge. I know they're independent publishers. So where did you come across them, and why did you choose Dauntless as a publisher?
Dauntless, I first noticed them when a fellow Illinois creator, Frankie White, they had a book go up through Dauntless. I think I heard maybe a little bit of rumblings before then, but they did this book called Eat My Flesh, Drink My Blood, which is this crazy horror comic. It's excellent. And I read it. I absolutely adored it. And from there, I just kind of had Dauntless on my radar, where each book they kept on putting up through Greenlight just looked more and more impressive. They looked really polished. Independent comics, they can range in all kinds of different quality for American comics, but as far as like a non-image, like IDW, like that threshold of independent publisher, like I thought Dauntless was putting out some killer work. And at some point from my time with Comic Book Yeti, I got to interact with Marcus a bit on a portfolio day post. He liked a couple of things that I had been doing, and we got to talking, and that interaction kind of led the way to, at some point, I think in January, I reached out to Marcus and pitched From Within to him. Like I said, I was really impressed with the quality of books they'd been putting out up to this point, and From Within felt like it'd be right at home with that.
What made you decide to be an interviewer at Comic Book Yeti?
So I initially joined, and this is probably 2021, like right into the heart of the pandemic. There was a open call for contributors to the site, and it started out as just being a reviewer, but there was a certain point where some opportunities came up to interview some creators, and I wanted to give it a try. Like, I'm a process junkie at heart. I love hearing about people's processes, the things they like doing, the things that they struggle with. That stuff always fascinates me personally. So it just kept on growing from there, to the point where, the past, for 2 cons, Heroes Con and C2E2, I did some at the convention interviews with a few creators, and that came with its own complications, as I've joked to in another interview earlier in the month, but it's been a very rewarding experience.
So, like, you said your experience is really rewarding, but how do you approach these people? Like, how does it feel?
So when I first did it in Heroes Con, it was a very last minute thing, and I just kind of threw it out there for, hey, who wants an interview? And I got just bombarded by a bunch of people. It was kind of flattering, to be honest, because barely any of them really knew me, I think. But it exposed me to a lot of different works I would not have seen otherwise. And, the nice thing was that, like, I had some time to read these books and come up with some questions of like what genuinely interested me. And, that's always like my angle when I interview people. I look at the work, and usually there's a thing or two that stand out to me, and I'll try and emphasize that. And then sometimes for written interviews, it's a little harder to do this because people's schedules, but I try to open the floor for like, oh, if someone gives me an interesting answer and I want to pick up on that, that's something I didn't plan otherwise, I like to leave myself open for that. At cons, it's very easy to do that, but written interviews, that's more difficult.
What would be like, if you had one piece of advice, it could be the best advice you've ever heard or just your own personal advice, but what would be your best advice to writers who want to become like a professional comic book writer?
Well, I would say don't be afraid to fail. That's the simplest thing. Like, I think everyone wants to make the magnum opus on their first try, and no one ever does. Even the people who you think did. Make sure to always have fun with what you're creating. Like, first things first. Like, I know that part's a job, but it takes a while to get to that point. Like, even I'm still working on getting to that point. So you got to at least enjoy what you're doing, because that'll make everything else worthwhile. I think the other part, as far as being a creator goes, and this can apply to being a writer or artist in general, is just don't be afraid to fail. Just keep on trying new things out. No one makes their magnum opus on their first try. Even those who you think did probably failed a lot to get to that place, and probably the thing that you think is their masterpiece, they probably think is awful, or they can at least find all the flaws that you're not looking at. That's the curse of being a creator.
That's so true, man. Like, I'm an artist, like I paint and I write too, but like there are so many paintings I've done that I don't like. Before I move on, I gotta give a shout out to my Patreon supporter, Sonya. Thank you so much for your contribution to my brand. If any of y'all want some rewards, check out patreon.com/MaddMoniArt. And for those watching on YouTube, I got some new merch. Yes, I bought myself the Mad Creators Skulls and Pencil bucket hat. You should check it out at Redbubble. That's where I got it from. I really love this hat. It's dope. I love the logo I made. I actually love the bucket shape. The whole brand idea is called Mad Creators. So if you're a creator and you have an attitude, then you should check out my designs. Okay, now back to the show. What are 3 book recommendations you have for my listeners?
I would say, okay, this one's a little weird, but it's excellent. Faithless by Brian Azzarello and Maria Lovett. It's a crazy horror comic. I can't even begin to describe it, but it's weird and out there. I would say the Criminal series by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. All of those volumes are excellent. And I would also say, this one's just kind of fun, but High Score Girl, the first couple volumes of that I'm in love with. It's such a different tone from the other two.
Which indie creator should be featured on this show so they can share their behind-the-scenes process?
Frankie White, 100%. Frankie would be fantastic. Devin Arscott also would be excellent. That's the person who I'm going to be also co-interviewing with shortly after this interview. But Devin is excellent, and I'd recommend him as well.
Nice. I'll be sure to check them out. And where can listeners find more about you?
So you can find me on Twitter at __Breen, my last name. That's where you can find me on Twitter to talk. You can also just keep following Dauntless Stories at their website. That's where continuous chapters will be dropping for From Within. And that's mostly where I'm at. You'll probably find me in a couple of other podcast interviews in the near future as well.
Well, thank you so much, Alex, for being part of MaddMoniArt's podcast show. I hope you have a nice day, a great weekend, and I will see you soon. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to show us some love wherever you're listening. Give me some feedback. All that stuff really helps out this show. This is only my 4th episode, so I really appreciate it. You can follow my guest and me, of course. All the links are in the description below or in the show notes, so make sure you check that if you want to follow him, read a story. You can follow the highlights of the show on Instagram at MaddMoniArt. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can shoot me an email at MaddMoniArt@gmail.com. And of course, you can DM me or at me on Twitter at MaddMoniArt. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. This is Imani telling you to stay safe, stay blessed, and stay mad.